In a rigged game, there's always one winner. And Albanese endorses the West's favourite war criminal. Coming up on the Citizens Report. Welcome to the Citizens Report. It's the 2nd of October 2025. I'm Robert Barwick and I'm joined today by Citizens Party researcher and writer Richard Bardon. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks, Robbie.
In this week's Citizens Report, we are going to talk about the overwhelming proof how rigged our economy is, because the latest solution again is being presented in the complete opposite of who it's going to benefit. And we'll tell you what the solution is and we'll tell you who's going to benefit from it. And it's not what you're being told, and it's so obvious when you follow this stuff as closely as we do. And it explains why we're a bit of a Johnny One Note on this particular subject. And second, we're going to just talk about, to me, I'll repeat it later, Albanese has hit an all-time low with what he did in London a couple of days ago. This is inexcusable. There's lots of things, Richard, that happen in politics that's like, okay, you wouldn't do it, you hate the fact it's being done, but you know the politician has to compromise or something like that. There's not even any of that. This is just completely inexcusable, and it's a blight on how the whole West operates, actually. But this is the moral low, all-time low for Anthony Albanese. We'll get into that. First, remember, we don't do this just for information. We're trying to change what we talk about, and that requires information so that people can hear the message and help get involved in the campaigns. And you can help with that with this show by helping us get it around. Like the show for the benefit of the algorithm, share it on social media, subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and remember to ring the bell icon so you can get the updates when they come. Please comment below. The feedback is invaluable, right? And I try and engage with it as much as I can. And also there's a donate button there. The Citizens Party is going all over the place. I'll be going to Canberra next week again with Dr. Andy Schmulo. We're going to keep intervening in the political process of Australia, but we need your help to do it. And if you've been a long-term viewer of the show, you'll know how effectively we've been able to do it. The issue is following through. You get all sorts of stuff to happen, but you've got to follow through and turn it into actual outcomes. And we do follow through, but we work with too many people who don't. And so in that context, I just wanted to give a shout out to Citizens Party supporter Richard, who one of our supporters here locally, who gifted us this towel. Don't throw in the towel, which is kind of like the way we run. That's our approach to politics in Australia. Don't throw in the towel. Just because it gets hard, we're going to keep on it because we know the solutions we're pushing are right. We're not going to throw in the towel. So thank you very much for that, Richard. Let me just display it there in case that helps with the camera and the messaging. And Richard knows who he is. And hopefully he'll be seeing this on Channel 31. Now, all right, quick start before we get started. Update. Dan Duggan. It's now the 2nd of October, which means it's 2 weeks from today that Dan Duggan's final hearing will take place in Canberra. This is his last-ditch attempt to try and stop this extradition. There will be an event starting at about 8 o'clock in the morning in front of the courthouse in Canberra. If you're in the vicinity, please get along and attend that protest event. Now, we will be represented there by Nolene Isherwood, who will be speaking on behalf of the Citizens Party. Nolene has helped to run the campaign that we've taken up on behalf of Dan Duggan, and she's had a lot to do with the Duggan issue for representing the Citizens Party. So and there will be other speakers there at that event. So please get along to that event. But also, and this is really important, and if you've been asked before, it's because it's for a good cause, and we're going to ask you again. If you haven't been asked, please help. The Duggans need your help. Remember, they don't want to beg for money. They've got a property there they want to sell that will cover everything. but the Americans got our government to freeze it, so they cannot use that money to pay for a legal defence. They're essentially, the lawyers are working on an IOU from the Duggans, right? So, you know, and they need the best lawyers to be able to argue for them in court. The government won't give them legal aid because they don't qualify. Because he's actually, you know what it takes, Richard, to qualify for legal aid in Australia? You've got to be charged with a crime in Australia.
Funny that.
He's been in jail for 3 years without being charged with a crime.
Yep. And
Right.
meanwhile, they're giving legal aid to the Americans. We're paying.
That's right.
We're paying for the, well, not prosecution, but persecution of Daniel Duggan.
The US, whatever the US does in Australia legally, our government pays for in relation to this case. I mean, it's so wrong and so unfair. The only people that are going to help are Australian citizens, right? So now, in the past, we've given a couple of links that you can go to. Only focus on the one, please. There's the website. Just go to the website, Free Dan Duggan. You know, you can Google that, or we'll put the link below. Go there and use those links to make a donation. Any help you can give them, they desperately need it. Because if we can't stop that extradition, he will be at the mercy of the American justice system, and they don't have one anymore. Even the current American president and his immediate predecessor say that, right? There is nothing trustworthy about the American justice system. It's completely politicised, and the people that are extraditing Dan Duggan are doing it for political reasons, right? To make an example of him. So, last-ditch attempt. They need your help.
Yep. Which under extradition law, even ours, should preclude him from being extradited, but the Australian government doesn't care about anybody's rules, even its own, when it suits them. When the Americans say, yeah, this is what you're going to do.
Yeah, when it comes to the Americans. All right, let's get into the main show. In a rigged game, there's always one winner. And you're not going to be surprised what we talk about. So the big news, was it yesterday it started?
Yeah, officially kicked in yesterday.
5% deposits for first home buyers.
And no lender's mortgage insurance. That scam where you pay the bank's insurance for when you default because they ripped you off too hard.
Woohoo! So now, on the surface, well, how are they selling this? You, first home buyer, desperate young first home buyer, you can buy a house.
Yeah.
Right?
But housing affordability.
Housing affordability, you can buy a house.
Or not.
Well, didn't our Prime Minister actually admit that it's going to make prices go up?
Yeah, he said, it's like very slightly, and they're throwing around this number like 0.5% or something. I don't know how, I haven't looked at the model that they cooked up to give that. This is what they do. They start with anything they want to make, whether they want to make it look more expensive or less expensive. You know, they want to make nuclear power look expensive, they want to make housing look cheaper, or not.
They start with the outcome.
They start with the number they want, and then they cook the model to give them that number.
Yep. But so he said 0.5%, but then all the sensible commentators say it's at least 10%.
Well, it's at the target market that, you know, under the price caps for houses. I forget what it is, but a couple of different mobs, including the premier housing market analysis and, you know, data brokers and that. They used to be called CoreLogic. They've got some other name now, but and a couple of other independent consulting companies and analytics firms as well are all being reported in the press today, saying that it's going to be between 3.5% and about 6.6% overall, the entire market, and the category that these first home buyers are being lured into is going to go up by almost 10% potentially.
Yep. So in other words,
and these guys are, you know, CoreLogic or Cotality, I don't know where they get these names. But their figures, they work on official data and their projections are pretty rock solid, reliable. The RBA uses their model.
Yeah, and when you say even those figures for overall, they're trying to separate out this impetus from this policy from all the other things that keep pushing up the market as well. This
is not how much the prices are going to keep going up.
Exactly.
This is how much more they're going to go up because of this policy. Specifically.
So in other words, what we have yet again is something that the government said this is to make housing more affordable, is by definition going to make housing less affordable. And they know that.
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, that's the deliberate intent of the policy.
Yeah, well, I mean, remember Claire O'Neill, the housing
That's right.
minister?
She said so.
Gave that interview and she said, oh, we want to see house prices keep going up, just not by as much.
So, the problem is, Richard, that I find, we've been on this subject for so long. So we monitored this from the year 2000 onwards when the government policy changed the housing market permanently from what had been the case for a century. In the whole of the 20th century, there was never a time when house prices in Australia were more than 3 to 4 times income, right? And that ratio is the sensible ratio for house prices. And government policy broke away from that in the year 2000, and now it's 10 to 15 times income, right, around Australia. And
the average dwelling now, not just houses, this is flats, dog box, those high-rise dog boxes and everything. The average dwelling value now is over $1 million.
Yeah. So here's who's the winner? Well, there's always the one winner, and that is the banks. So this policy is, because of this 5% deposit, more people can buy a house. The real way they should be presenting it is because of this 5% deposit, banks can lend more money.
Yep.
That's actually how the policy works in practice. This is to help banks lend more money. And it's always the case. Now there's a precedent for this. This is the government getting involved in essentially the same scam that was the subprime scandal that led to the global financial crisis. How did the subprime scandal work? Very quickly. Banks in America and in Australia, we just didn't call them subprime, we called them low doc, no doc loans. But what happened was there was this massive explosion in speculation in real estate by banks. And they were lending to everybody. But very soon they ran out of viable borrowers, people who they knew by their own calculations could afford the loan. They'd lend to all those. But they wanted to keep lending because they were on a wonderful wicket, right? These mortgages were so profitable. They had to keep lending. They were securitizing them and derivatizing them and having an absolute field day on the products they were creating, right? So they had a problem. How did they solve that problem? They just found a way to lend to people who couldn't afford the loans.
Right? I mean, that's why they did the no-doc loans here. Yep. American banks, they got the paperwork because there's rules that make them, and they were just allowed to say, well, we know you can't afford this, but we'll lend you the money anyway. In Australia, they just went like this. Yep. And the government let them.
It was exactly the same problem, and it was exactly the same scale. By the time of the crash in 2008, 20% of lending in America was subprime. Here, 20% of mortgage lending was low doc, no doc, right? Exactly the same scale. So this is the banks trying to feed their machine and resorting to that. Well, now you've got the same thing, but it's the government that's helping feed their machine.
Yeah.
They are creating the subprime borrowers with this 5% deposit to feed that bank machine because they never want it. They are terrified of the idea that they preside over a drop in house prices.
Yeah, I mean, Leif Van Onselen, the economist, that former Reserve Bank economist at Macro Business, yep. he just called it straight up. This is a taxpayer guaranteed, government guaranteed housing bubble now.
Yep.
I mean, it has been in practice for nearly 30 years, but now it's explicitly government guaranteed.
They're guaranteeing they guarantee the top 15 or 20% of the mortgage. Effectively, is what they're doing.
Yeah, it's normally a 25% deposit. Now, if you're paying a 5% deposit, that means they're guaranteeing the rest and the default insurance, the LMI.
Now, in case you think that this might be an unintended consequence, because that governments and political parties love that.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oops.
Nothing's ever deliberate, right? Even though, as the great Denise Braley has always pointed out, and Denise Braley is the founder of Banking and Finance Consumers Association. She was a warrior against this kind of abuses by the banks. She pointed out that all the mistakes, all these unintended things, were always in the bank's favour. Oops, oops, oops. It's never in the customer's favour.
Yeah. There's never, you remember the old Monopoly game? Bank error in your favour. Not anymore.
No way.
Never happened.
So, in case you're wondering that, there's an actual precedent that proves that the government, this was a Labor government, deliberately lie about saying the policy is for one purpose when it's for the other. And that was in 2008. And I have to tell you, I was there. I mean, we were monitoring this very closely. So the global financial crisis erupted on the 15th of September 2008. And there was the propaganda in Australia was huge because there was all this all this rhetoric in the media about our banks are sound, Australia's banks are sound, don't worry about them. Behind the scenes there was absolute turmoil, and we know that there was absolute turmoil. And there's a couple of books been written about this. Leith Van Onselen's partner at Macro Business, David Llewellyn-Smith, co-wrote a book with Ross Garnaut about the global financial crisis, and they revealed that on the weekend of October 11 and 12, the banks were meeting and they were on their knees to the Rudd government. And Rudd had this thing called the Gang of Four. Him, Julia Gillard, Wayne Swan, the Treasurer, and Lindsay Tanner, the Finance Minister. They were the Gang of Four. And the banks met with them and were on their knees
this is the Big Four and Macquarie.
And Macquarie saying, we need you to guarantee us or we'll be insolvent sooner rather than later. Right? That's what the bank said. So in a panic, the Rudd government came up with two guarantees. They guaranteed deposits. They guaranteed bank borrowings overseas. That was the one that the banks were really in trouble on. And there was one that I always call the third guarantee. It wasn't called that. It was they tripled the first home buyers grant, right? And they said, when they announced the tripling of the first home buyers grant, John Howard had introduced it in 2001 at $7,000. And in 2008, they tripled it to $21,000. When they announced that, Kevin Rudd said, this is to make housing more affordable. It was the exact opposite. And Lenore Taylor and David Uren wrote a book called Shitstorm, because that's what Kevin Rudd shocked everyone on TV. Right? He used the word shitstorm.
He broke the taboo on senior ministers and PMs swearing on television.
Yeah, everyone does it. Anyway, he called it, the GFC was a shitstorm, and so they wrote this book. And they revealed in that book that what actually happened is they were also panicked because of the global financial crisis, the housing market had started to fall in Australia, just like it was falling around the world. And they were so desperate to arrest that fall and not have a crash like in America or the UK that they announced that policy of the tripling the first home buyers grant to get a lot more people buying homes to push prices up.
Yeah. Not build more houses, just compete for the existing ones.
Push prices up, which means make housing unaffordable. Yet they announced the policy is to make housing affordable. Right? That is an absolute cut and dried precedent of lying to the public to get the opposite outcome. And frankly, Albanese's government has just done the exact same thing. This is nothing. At this stage, and housing then, Richard, was like 7 or 8 times income. We're now talking 10 to 15 times income. It's completely disconnected from reality. It's the biggest cancer in our economy, the cost of housing. It's crushing everybody. Right? And we've all got to take a long, hard look at ourselves, all of us who own properties, and realise there's no solution to this without house prices coming down. But then when you stop and think about it, you realise, well, hang on, it's all relative anyway. Because if I think I'm a millionaire and I want to actually have that money in my pocket, I've got to sell the house. But then where do I live?
Yep. Then you either got to rent, which you can't afford either,
That's
or
right.
buy another house, which is even less affordable than the one that you can barely afford to pay for now.
Exactly. If they had let the housing market crash in 2008, we wouldn't be in this mess now.
Yep.
But every time it's come close to that, the governments have come up with these lies to prop it up. But they're not saving you. They're not saving your $1 million, your mentality, you're worth $1 million. They are, what happened when the housing market crashed in America? The banks crashed. What happened when the housing market crashed in the UK? The banks crashed. That's what they're saving. The banks here. In America, no bank had more than 40% exposure to mortgages. Our big 4 banks here have over 60, they're close to 70% exposure to mortgages. Right? You know what they could do if they actually let it crash? They could, nationalise them like the Brits did, or more importantly, set up a government bank and help fund the economy that way, exactly as we've been proposing.
Yep.
But they won't because they're rigging everything in the favour of the banks. And the banks, they're I don't know, what's the metaphor? They're like, I'll tell you what the metaphor is because I recently watched it. Apocalypse Now, the beach scene when the helicopters come in and the stupid colonel who says, Robert Duvall's character, right? I love the smell of napalm in the morning, smells like victory. He wants to hit golf balls and go surfing while everything's exploding around them, right? That is what the banks are like with this economy. They are pouring fuel on the fire everywhere, but those executives that are making these decisions are making massive, massive bonuses from their profits. It's crazy. That's Australia all over. Now, that's not the only area where the banks, everything's rigged in favour of the banks. Latest breaking news, we'll put up the headline here from the Daily Mail. It's now policy. There's a spreading policy at Australia Post for post offices not to take cash. And this is one in the Sydney CBD on Kent Street. The post office there isn't paying cash. The first time there was a post office that stopped taking cash was in Manly, and that was explained away at the time as something there'd been some damage to the post office, and that was individual circumstances. Now you can see that Australia Post is instituting a policy, and they say it's to make payments more efficient. Even though they are bank at post, right, where people are there to do their banking, including depositing and withdrawing cash, right?
Yeah. Cash which just goes into their pool of cash.
Yeah, exactly.
And they keep track of it and remit it to whoever.
Now, as someone in this article points out, well, hang on, why is a government-owned business not taking the legal tender of the country? Right, it's just crazy.
That is the question.
Who benefits? There's an absolute push for cashlessness in Australia. The article also quotes Richard Holden, the economist, and we'll put some of his quotes on the screen while I'm talking about him. He's just basically saying the government should be getting rid of cash. Let's just get rid of cash, right? It's lunacy.
There's something seriously broken in that bloke's head, eh?
Well, but
I've been tracking him for years, and he used to sound reasonable, and then something broke in his brain during the pandemic, and he's been on a rant about this garbage ever since.
But at least, Richard, at least half his problem can be explained by the fact that he's an economist. You can line all the economists up in the world, and they'll still won't reach a conclusion.
Yeah,
right. There's a million jokes about them.
Yeah, well, the other one I remember was if you lined up every economist in Australia end to end, it'd probably be the best place for them.
There's economists. Economists try and pretend they're scientists, but they're the one discipline that never has to be right, right? And it doesn't affect their employability. And he actually says, he criticises Jim Chalmers, and I'm not going to defend Jim Chalmers, but he says Jim Chalmers' cash mandate, which is a fraud anyway, he says that's him being a politician to appeal to people on a populist basis. I'm an economist, so I know what I'm talking about. No, you don't, mate, because if you had your way and Australia Post has its way, who benefits? There's only one entity that benefits from Australians not having cash. That is the same one, the banks. Because if you have cash, you can operate independently of the banks. You don't need the bank's permission to transact. And don't kid yourself. When you use your card, when you transact in something other than cash, you do need the bank's permission. Now it's programmed that happens automatically, but that same program can sometimes be used against people. It's called debanking, and suddenly you don't have access to any of your accounts. In fact, there's a growing movement online on social media of people repeatedly experiencing this debanking phenomenon when suddenly they're getting turned off access to their accounts. And the banks are using these weaselly excuses about lack of verification of their identities and stuff like this, right? There's a young woman, we can edit this out if producer if you can't find it, but if we can find it, I'll give it to the producer to put this on the screen. We can watch this quick video of this young woman.
There is something seriously wrong with the banks in Australia. I can't believe I'm already making another one of these TikToks, but it's happened to me again. If you've been following along, you will know that I recently moved all my personal bank accounts from ING to HSBC, following ING blocking my accounts and leaving with me no access to my money. HSBC have now done the same thing, if not worse. HSBC gave me no notice that this was going to happen to my accounts. Instead, I only found out by logging into my internet banking on the app and seeing that all my accounts had blocks on them. I called HSBC immediately and got put through to their fraud department and was advised that I needed to go into a branch and verify my identity with 100 points of ID, and they couldn't tell me as to why the restrictions had been put on. I thought that this was a little bit strange, as normally the banks can at least tell you as to why the restrictions have been placed. Nevertheless, though, I hung up the phone and went straight to the nearest branch in the CBD here in Melbourne. Once I got into the branch, I provided the teller with 100 points of ID. They added it to my account and said that I would need to now wait 2 to 3 business days for a response from HSBC. Again, they couldn't tell me as to why the restrictions were taking place, only that I had to wait while they investigated. I was also asked over the phone and in person what my intention was when I opened up my HSB bank accounts. Again, this was a very odd question. I advised them both over the phone and in person. It is a personal transaction account for my personal banking. You can see my salary going in every month and my expenses and daily spending coming out. I then asked the teller, what am I supposed to do with no access to my funds for 2 days? And she just laughed and said, good question. How are the banks given so much control that they can stop you accessing your funds and deciding what you want to do with your money? I have lodged an Africa complaint after my experience last time, and I found that was the fastest way to get a result rather than wait for the banks. I think a review on all Australian banks needs to be done ASAP, as this can't be happening to everyday consumers.
This young woman moved her account to HSBC and suddenly she gets locked and she's told, oh, you've got to go and provide 100 points of ID, and then even then it's going to take days to sort it out, etc. Whereas I know I have a first-hand account, 100 points of ID. I think I've used this on the show before. I have a first-hand account where an elderly, wealthy lady in Sydney, in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, heard that the government guarantee up to $250,000 applied per bank, and if she spread her money out between the different banks, then she'd get the guarantee on all of them. So she took $250,000. She banked with ANZ, I think, and she took $250,000 cheque to the Commonwealth Bank. She'd never banked with in her life. She went in there. She did not have 100 points of ID, not even close. She had some ID, nowhere near 100 points, but because she was depositing $250,000, the Commonwealth Bank let her open an account. It's always rigged in their favour, always. But there's hundreds of Australians that are, and it's a growing phenomenon, are being debanked by these banks. If you do not have cash, you're at the mercy of all of that, and they are once again the only winners. Finally, on this theme of who benefits, who's it rigged in favour of? We need to talk about Queenstown, because after we shot the show last Thursday, on the Friday, Queenstown and Tasmania did have its last day as a bank, and the bank was closed, I think, about midday. So now, this was personally frustrating to us who were involved in the campaign. On the last week, the media was all over it. And so we're going to play a clip from Channel 7 in a second, but Sky News was there, the ABC was there. They were all over this subject. And when you do this kind of work and you deal with politicians, one thing I have learned is you'll never get the politicians to take something seriously unless it's covered in the media. If the media was there to circle the corpse, right, like rubbernecking, essentially, quite macabre. If they had come 2 months ago to actually report on the tragedy, really, and how that could have put pressure on the government to actually do something that might have saved the bank. But anyway, nevertheless, they turned up for the last day. So the locals, led by the wonderful Janet Leigh, who's just a resident of the town who just worked her butt off to try and save this bank, right? You'll see Janet, and they held a funeral for the bank, and then they held a wake. So we'll play the clip.
Queenstown locals have had their final goodbyes to their beloved Bendigo Bank. Residents ending a long fight to keep the bank's doors open with flowers and beers to pay tribute.
Putting the West Coast last bank Bendigo to rest, a memorial marking its closure.
I hope that they see it for what it is, that it's the death of face-to-face banking in Queenstown.
A memorial is a good place. That's how the people feel, as if something's died in town.
The last physical bank on the entire West Coast officially shutting up shop today, but not without a quirky Queenstown send-off. Residents gathering at the golf club for a funeral of sorts, mourning the loss.
Well, that's our community spirit. We try and laugh when we can't cry.
Tributes and beers flowing, all light-hearted, but a loss residents say will have a heavy impact across the West Coast.
So the community can get together and share their anguish and disappointment.
To then have a historic town like ours with beautiful historic buildings, not display a bank in it, it really just, it's disheartening.
Despite months of opposition from locals and a petition attracting almost 3,000 signatures urging the bank to keep its doors open, it wasn't enough.
The Bendigo Bank not just crushing the great Aussie dream of owning your own home, is impairing our town from expanding and growing.
The bank saying the decision was made amid rising costs and reduced foot traffic. A final hurrah for a bank well loved. Rebecca Gaidenera, 7 Tasmania News.
And of course, you recognise their citizens, the guy in the blue and yellow jacket, that's Citizens Party Representative Daryl Staggard, went down there for the event. Thanks for that, Dale. Thanks to Dale Webster as well, of course, the independent journalist. She's done a lot of work on this issue, enormous amount of work. But thanks to Daryl for going along there, and Caroline Lana, who's one of our Citizens Party representatives, who's on the West Tamar Council as well. She went along to, for that event too. But this is shocking that this could happen. Remember, it's not just one bank. It was 38 bank branches and agencies, 10 branches and 28 agencies, 22 of which are the last bank in town. It's shocking that this can happen after the Senate inquiry. There was a Senate inquiry to address this crisis, right? And the Senate inquiry put the banks up against the wall, called out all their lies, came up with good recommendations, right, that will fix this, and the banks have been allowed to just ignore it.
Yeah, because the government has ignored the report.
They
have
know,
90, as we'll keep saying, they have legally have 90 days to respond. It's been, what, nearly 18 months now? 17 months?
We're coming up to 17 months now. Yep.
Yeah,
And I'll be
and not a peep, nothing. This was a unanimous report. There was no dissenting report from the government senators on the panel. They all signed off on this.
multi-party, and the Labor people endorsed it as well.
National, Labor,
And we can't get them
Greens,
to say a word.
And now where are they?
And what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Are the banks acting with impunity because the government won't do anything, or is it because the governments are scared of taking on the banks that the banks know they can act with impunity, right? Whatever the case, it's a crime and it's got to be broken. We have to break the power of the banks, and only a government bank will do that. So we'll put on the screen now, news.com.au covered Queenstown on their website yesterday, and it's a very good article. They responded to a media release the Citizens Party put out, and they called me up and interviewed me, so we'll just scroll down there as I'm talking. But they gave due weight to the government bank solution because that's the only thing that's going to do it. There's no other. You won't get the small banks to take them on you. I want the small banks to all survive. All these mutuals. If we were in government, we would be doing everything to help those mutuals, be real pillars of their communities. But there's been thousands and thousands of banks closed around Australia, right? These ones aren't going to replace that. The only thing that can replace it is a government bank operating in all the post offices in Australia. That will replace it.
Yep.
Not Bank at Post, as the article covers, and I said that Bank at Post is garbage. Bank at Post is a way for the banks to exploit the taxpayers who own Australia Post and exploit the licensees who run the licensed post offices. They are screwing them out of their wealth. They're the most profitable banks in the world, yet they're able to pretend they're providing a service through Bank at Post that we own, and they barely pay for it, and they charge the heaviest fees to use it.
The only time it's been equitable was for those couple of years that Christine Holgate was the CEO of Australia Post, got them, held their feet to the fire, made them pay properly, for which she was rewarded by Scott Morrison and then then opposition leader Albanese conspiring to dud her out of her job on false pretenses.
Yep.
That's who these people are.
Yep. So the fight continues. We won't give up. We won't throw in the towel. All right, let's move on because I'm looking at the clock here. We're running out of time. And we've got a few more rants to go on. Albanese endorses the West's favourite war criminal. And like I said, this is an all-time low for Anthony Albanese, and that's not saying much, of course, you would say. I've got Richard on here. I'll let him loose to rant himself. But what he's done is endorsed, not only has he endorsed the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair for this new gig as running this authority in Gaza, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's not even that, right? It's, like I said, there may be, even the Arab countries and whatever, they're all sort of trying to compromise with this particular proposal. The Hamas in Gaza is having to deal with it. Anyway, we'll talk about that more in a minute. It's the way he endorsed him. It's what he actually said. Now, I'm going to get a bit controversial in a second, but I'm going to read what he said about, because you'll see the screen there. Albanese met with Tony Blair in London, and this is what he said. Quote, Tony Blair is someone who's always played a constructive role. He's someone who does look for solutions. He's someone who has been involved in the Middle East issues for some period of time. Yeah, no kidding. And I'm sure he will always play a constructive role, because that's the nature of Tony Blair. Are you kidding? Now here's me getting controversial. And I don't like doing this lightly, but I'm going to do it because stuff it, it's Tony Blair. If you take that quote, Richard, and replace the word Middle East with Jewish, and replace the name Blair with Hitler, Hitler is someone who's always played a constructive role. He's someone who does look for solutions. He's someone who's been involved in the Jewish issues for some period of time, and I'm sure that he'll always play a constructive role because that's the nature of Hitler. He may as well have said that.
Yep.
If you're talking about Tony Blair in the Middle East in the same bloody sentence and not demanding he go to jail or be executed, you are scum. Because that's the real history of Tony Blair and the Middle East. He may as well have compared him, like I've done, to Hitler and the Jewish question.
Yep. And the thing is, we know Anthony Albanese knows this because he was almost saying that at the time. Because back then he was on, or pretending to be on, the side that opposed the Iraq War.
Well, you've got to wonder about, how much was he pretending now? I mean, seriously, you cannot be this bad in government on these issues that you used to champion.
Everything. He was one of the ringleaders of the Parliamentary Friends of Palestine and calling for, all of the things that the people he's now ridiculing, and doing factional deals to bypass in the party conferences and all of these things, because, and we can get into more detail, but he's basically admitted in interviews now that his sole purpose is to stay in government. That's all he cares about.
Yes, and
to keep Australia in the imperial system that's run by America and Britain.
But if your sole purpose, and this used to come up with Jeremy Corbyn, because Jeremy Corbyn, when he took over the leadership of the British Labor Party, was so different. And his sole purpose was not to stay in government. His sole purpose was to actually change government. But the people who attacked him were the Blair's people, right? Yeah. Power at all cost. And so the logic is this. This is what Labor people get morally corrupted by. They go, well, okay, for us to get into government, we've got to make all these compromises. And then when we get there, so we can't do we have to stop doing the things that we would naturally do to get there. And once we get there, to stay there, we can't do those things. So you end up being like the people you supposedly oppose. But you say, well, at least it's better us doing it to you than them.
Yeah.
Right?
What did Andy Schmulo call them? Diet liberals, right?
Yep.
Same, fewer calories, same great liberal taste.
So let's just recap on Tony Blair for a second, right? Now, I used to say until the last 18 months, one of my lines was the Iraq War was the war crime of the 21st century. It no longer is. But you cannot, there was no one place, well, actually, I might even be unfair there. You probably know more of this about. I mean, places like Fallujah maybe are comparable to Gaza, but we didn't get to see it, right? We didn't see there what we're seeing now in Gaza. Gaza is the war crime of the 21st century. The only thing that competes with it is the Iraq War, and that bastard is the architect of the Iraq War. Bush and Cheney, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney would never have pulled it off without Tony Blair. Yeah. And as we wrote at the time, the idea that Bush led Blair is a joke. Bush was the biggest country bumpkin dumbass to ever be president of the United States, run by a kitchen cabinet. Tony Blair is a sinister, evil, Machiavellian, and apologies to Machiavelli, right? Manipulative politician. He led this, absolutely, to get this war up because it fitted with the agenda that he used to be espousing. He deployed MI6 to cook up the lies. This was not intelligence failures, deliberate lies. MI6 and the CIA, but the CIA wasn't as good as MI6 at it.
Yeah.
The CIA kept disappointing Dick Cheney, right? They got the strongest thing the CIA was ever able to say was MI6 has said. Tony Blair got MI6 to say it. They had these euphemisms. The sexed up dossier.
Yeah.
What did that mean? Pack of lies, right? We'll put the famous one, the famous claim was the 45 minutes headline in the newspaper. Saddam Hussein could attack London in 45 minutes, right? It was never true. And then the other thing, there was one of their sources, and any like intelligence professionals at the time who were seeing this intelligence were commenting at the time. They knew it was garbage, but they weren't allowed to say anything. But one of their sources, I forget the code name, I used to know all this stuff because it's been so long ago now, was this guy who described how Saddam's chemical weapons, they were in these this formation where they're like in this cylindrical tube, and they hung like beads, right? And they were little green balls hanging like beads in these cylindrical tubes, and everyone's writing this down. Oh mate, this is really dangerous, and this is like one of those horrible chemical weapons, like not the Russian, not sarin, something like that, right? And what he was literally describing the movie The Rock with Nicolas Cage.
It's just
he's just making it up.
Drop shot or something? Was that the
Yeah,
one?
something like that, right? Just making it up, right? And that's what MI6 was able to whitewash into the intelligence. If it wasn't for the Murdoch media that helped to sell this thing, and Tony Blair, this would never, ever, ever have happened. Now, the Chilcot report, we wrote about this week in the Australian Alert.
We wrote about it 9 years ago.
We
published it.
We dug out our archives report. Chilcot's Iraq findings are grounds to bring Blair to justice. That's what we wrote about the Chilcot report in 2016, which Australia didn't have an equivalent of the Chilcot inquiry. The British did, and he was not allowed by the terms of reference to recommend punishment for Blair. So he went right to the edge and just left it there. We made the point that he's left this for the ICC, International Criminal Court, etc., can take this stuff up.
ICC, ICJ.
They can take this stuff up, but of course, nothing has happened, right? Absolutely nothing has happened. Now, why? Because white people don't go to
Well, they basically, I forget who it was, but one
Westerners
of these.
don't go to The Hague.
So that's one of the previous US administration officials wrote that in a memo. The first Trump administration, I forget his name, but he wrote to Rex Tillerson, who was an oil baron, came in as Trump's mate, and he gets appointed as Secretary of State and starts saying these things that sound reasonable and principled. And he gets, whether he was or not, I wouldn't know. I don't know the man, but he gets written this memo saying this isn't how we do things. International law is to be applied selectively as we interpret it to our people we designate our adversaries. It doesn't apply to our allies until until we decide to throw them under the bus, and then it does if we say so, basically.
And remember, Richard, the Iraq War killed 1 million people, right? What he started in Iraq killed 1 million people.
Yeah, well, and that's in Iraq.
There.
And then if you count that as the genesis of ISIS, which it was, including the guy they've now installed as president of Syria, who's still on the terrorist watch list. His organisation's still on everybody's list, but he's allowed to fly in and out of New York and go to the UN and shake hands with all this idiot David Lammy, the
British Foreign Secretary,
whatever he is,
one of Blair's acolytes.
Yep.
And then the other thing, of course, after Iraq, the other thing that Blair was indirectly involved in, but he had an important role in it, was what ended up happening to Libya, because it was Blair who got all the credit for bringing in Gaddafi from the cold and convincing Gaddafi to give up his weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
And as soon as Gaddafi did, what happened? Bang.
Yeah.
right? They had him, and they destroyed the country of Libya, which is just as horrible as what's been done to Iraq. And he had a role in manipulating that outcome as well. But now they want this guy to be, God help the people of Gaza, the poor people of Gaza. He's supposed to be the adjudicator of this plan. And like I said, you know, when you got Donald Trump and whatever, you know, he's saying, oh, this is the way we're going to do this. Look, all the countries of the world are going to feel they have to engage with it one way or another. So not to judge necessarily their responses, but what a garbage plan.
Yeah, so it's cooked up supposedly by Trump and Netanyahu, the genocidaire, as the French term that everybody's adopted. So this is designed to please Israel, to give them continued power. Basically, it's an ultimatum from Trump, and they admit in there by saying, well, if Hamas agrees to this, we'll resume the aid. In other words, they're blocking aid. They're starving them on purpose, right? They admit that, backhandedly.
Except because of that, Netanyahu was on TV this morning trying to spin it again the other way. But yeah, you're right.
And then he gets up the only half-decent thing in there is that it says, well, the direct military occupation by Israel of the parts of, the large parts of Gaza that it occupies now, they'll pull out and be replaced with this international force that's just there to do what Israel used to do. Yeah. And he's got up and given a speech in Hebrew that the Western media aren't reporting, saying we're just going to ignore that part. And of course, there's these anti-genocide, anti-Zionist Israeli Jews who translate this stuff and make it available, right? But the Western media and governments don't care. So what this plan is basically, you can agree to this that goes back to the status quo ante, basically, or we'll just, keep wiping you all out. So you can die fast or slow. That's the offer.
Yep. And it is fast or slow because anyone who followed this subject before October 7, 2023 knows there's a reason October 7 happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's 100 years of this terrorism, and I have to almost laugh in a kind of, it's Kafkaesque. These people, no, you can't recognise Palestine, you can't do whatever, can't stop Israel from doing whatever it wants because that would be rewarding terrorism with statehood. Rewarding terrorism with statehood is exactly, literally why Israel exists.
Yeah, we covered that a couple of weeks ago when in the alert. We can put this on the screen. There's the 2023 movie called Shoshana. If you haven't, you could go and look it up and watch it, which actually documents exactly what Richard said: the Stern Gang and its terrorist attacks, which were done to force the British out and create the formation of Palestine
and the best
Israel. Sorry.
Yeah, and the best summary of this plan, and we can put a screenshot of it up, is Craig Mokaba, the former UN human rights official who helped design a lot of policies that they are not now following, and he resigned in protest over this stuff a couple of years ago, nearly, when all this, when the current phase of the Gaza genocide started. And he just said, it's like he goes through the details of why it's exactly what I just said. Basically, it's Israel still runs everything, gets to do whatever it wants. Yep. There's no accountability. There's no sovereignty. This idea that this is recognition of a sovereign state of Palestine that Albanese said, no, it's the opposite. It comes with conditions that preclude sovereignty from the outset. It's fake, just like everything else about this guy.
Yep. And like I said, God help the poor people of Gaza. Finally, we have to comment on this because like I said, what we've been going after Albanese for is inexcusable, but there's a side of him that is also so pathetic. And one of those things is, this is even more pathetic because public opinion in Australia is not in favour of, say, what Israel's doing in Gaza, and it's not in favour of the United States, right? Most Australians are very unhappy with Donald Trump and his treatment of Australia. Yet there's this charade between the two major parties in the media. Will Albanese get a meeting with Trump? as if Albanese paying personal tribute to Trump and kissing the ring is what Australia needs for its self-worth, right? And so if I was the Prime Minister, I would be saying, get stuffed. If Trump wants to talk to me, he can come to me. Why go grovelling to that guy, right? But that's not Albanese. So put up the picture. This is Albanese. I found out the circumstance of this. There was a cocktail. The American president, held a cocktail event for 100 heads of government because of the United Nations General Assembly was on. And Albanese was at that. And so you'll see lots of photos of people with Trump at that event. Albanese, of course, in Albanese style, he goes up there to Trump. It's just a handshake. It's not a meeting. Whips out his camera. Can we take a selfie? And takes that selfie because he thinks that is appeasing these lunatics back in Australia who demand that he has to have a meeting with the president. I mean, give us a break. Show some self-respect, Prime Minister. Seriously, you're embarrassing your country. Anyway, on that, we're running out of time. So, like I said, a couple of things. Don't throw in the towel, despite how frustrated we get at things. We're never going to throw in the towel. We're going to fight these things to the end. We're coming down to the wire on Dan Duggan, though, like it's 14 days. Please, please, please help the Duggan family. Go to Free Dan Duggan and make a contribution. Richard, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks to the viewer for tuning in. Tune in next week for more of the Citizens Report.
Authorised by Robert Barwick, Citizens Party, Melbourne.